I will never forget the day I became a father. Not because it was one of the happiest days of my life, but because it was the day that everything I believed in fell apart. I was on my way back from a business trip, exhausted, but filled with that good kind of anxiety. My phone buzzed with dozens of missed calls. My mother in law, my mother, messages from friends. When I finally managed to answer, the news came raw and unfiltered. My wife had gone into labor and was already at the hospital. I drove like a madman. All I could think was that I had to be there, that I couldn't miss the birth of my son. I burst into the hospital with my heart in my throat, breathless and shaking. I went to the reception desk and gave them my wife's name. The attendant looked at her screen, then at me with a faintly awkward smile. Are you the child's father? I almost laughed with nerves. Of course I am. I'm her husband. And that's when she dropped the bomb. But the child's father is already in there. We had met at a barbecue hosted by mutual friends. Nothing dramatic. A spilled beer on my shirt, an apology from her, laughter, and a conversation that never seemed to end. We went out a few times. Then it just clicked. The beginning was easy. I was the quieter one. My work required travel, but I always found a way to keep up with her rhythm. For the first 2 years, everything worked. She would send me cheesy messages. I would send her pictures of the cities I was visiting. We married after 4 years together. A simple civil ceremony, just family from both sides, followed by a reception at a restaurant. 3 years after we were married, she told me she was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but when it happened, I dove in headfirst. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I always thought we were solid. On my work trips, I'd sometimes be gone for 2 or 3 days, but I did everything I could to be present. I worried about her, about the appointments, sent good morning texts, and bought her whatever strange foods she was craving. She, on the other hand, had always had a more active social life. Lots of friends, college buddies, hobby groups. I was never the jealous type. I always trusted her. Even when she came home later than usual, I swallowed any discomfort. It didn't happen overnight. First came the short replies to my texts, as if talking to me was an obligation. Then, the canceled plans. Always too tired for dinner with me, but full of energy to go out with her college group. Every now and then, I'd find receipts in the car from places we hadn't been to together. A new blouse, a different perfume, all explained away with vague excuses. And of course, there was that college friend, the so and so, who popped up in every story but never had a real reason to be such a constant presence in her life. I convinced myself I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I told myself it was my own insecurity, that she was different from the stories you hear. And during the pregnancy, I noticed a few strange things. The way she'd hide her phone screen, vague excuses for not answering my calls when I was away, but I chalked it up to hormones, fatigue, my own imagination. Never, under any circumstances, did I imagine that on the day my son was born, I would be confronted with the truth. The receptionist repeated the sentence, now looking at me with pity. The child's father has already been here. Mr. So and so, right? When she said the name, it wasn't just surprise. It was that familiar, sickening twist in my stomach. It was a name I had learned to hear without flinching. Her college friend. The guy who gave her rides, who understood her projects, who was always helping everyone out. I tried to respond with logic. There must be a mistake in the system. I'm her husband. Embarrassed, she repeated. He introduced himself as the father. In that moment, it felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. My head was spinning. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I asked to go in. I signed for a visitor's wristband and walked down the corridor with that name hammering in my mind. I remembered her changing her phone password twice in the same month. The party that lasted until dawn, the text messages that vanished with the excuse of a dead battery. I remembered our last Saturday together. She was glued to her phone the entire time, laughing at some inside joke I wasn't a part of. I wanted to hit myself for not facing this sooner. At the same time, a part of me was still praying for a miracle. Please, let this be some ridiculous mistake. As I walked down the hall, I kept repeating to myself, no, this can't be happening. There has to be an explanation. It must be a misunderstanding. I stopped at the door, took a breath, and pushed it open. I needed to hear it from her, looking me in the face. When I opened the door to the room, the scene felt surreal. My wife was lying in bed, exhausted, with the baby in her arms. Beside her stood my parents and her parents, and they all avoided my eyes. The air was heavy. The first thing I said was, "Who is this man who showed up here claiming to be my son's father? Who is he? Is he your lover?" My voice was loud, nervous, trembling. My wife looked away. Her parents tried to calm me down, saying it wasn't the time, that she needed peace. My parents just stood there, frozen, clearly not understanding the situation. But I couldn't contain myself. I needed answers, right then and there. My wife turned her face to me, her expression tired, irritated, and somehow defiant. "You are ruining the most important moment of our lives. How can you talk about a lover at a time like this?" I laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. How can I? The receptionist just told me another man was here, claiming to be my son's father, and you expect me to accept that in silence? I want an explanation, now. The silence was suffocating. Her parents tried to intervene again, pleading for calm, but I had no calm left. I wanted the truth. The baby started to cry, and my wife, thinking this might bend me to her will, tried to call me closer. "Come, hold your son." I stood frozen, watching from a distance. I couldn't take a single step. I couldn't extend my arms. "I won't touch him until I have a DNA test. I need to be sure." It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. My in-laws stared at me as if I were a monster. My mother started to cry, as if ashamed of what I was doing. My father approached, placing a hand on my arm, trying to reason with me, but my mind was made up. She exploded. "You will regret saying that. You're being cruel. You're rejecting your own son." I just answered, "I'd rather be cruel now than be a fool for the rest of my life." She became even more furious, her eyes filled with tears, screaming that I was being horrible, a monster who was cursing his own child, that one day I would regret this bitterly. But I didn't back down. I just repeated it. A DNA test only after that. From that point on, the atmosphere turned into a war. At the hospital, the looks were of condemnation. The nurses eyed me as if I were a scoundrel, a father rejecting his own child. My in-laws treated me with a coldness that suggested I was to blame for everything. My own parents seemed lost, unsure how to act or what to think. When she was discharged, we each retreated to our separate corners of the house in silence. My mother-in-law insisted on showing up almost every day. Sometimes, she even slept on the couch. I believed it wasn't just to help her daughter, but also out of fear that something might happen. Or maybe just to be a meddling pain in the ass. I barely slept in those days. My wife, even while recovering, did nothing but shoot me looks of hatred and repeat that I had destroyed our family. I stayed quiet most of the time, wanting no conversation with her. But some nights, the anger overflowed. I would confront her directly. Tell me the truth. How long were you cheating on me with him? My voice was lower now, heavier with rage. You're crazy, there's no one else, she would retort, avoiding my gaze. No one else? Then what was he doing at the hospital? Introducing himself as the father. What about all those nights you disappeared? The excuses about getting a ride? She would cry. She'd say I was inventing things, that I was letting hatred consume me. But with every evasion, I grew more certain that the truth was right there, hidden in plain sight. And inside, my conviction grew stronger. I had to get the DNA test. The following days were hell. I stayed in the house with her and the baby, but it was like I was a stranger there. Every cry from the newborn made me flinch, not with tenderness, but with doubt. I would look at that tiny being, and all I could think was, is he mine? Sometimes my mother-in-law would try to persuade me, coming at me with prepared speeches about how I was hurting her daughter, how this could destroy our marriage, and how the resentment would only harm us more. I would just look at her, saying nothing. But one day, fed up, I questioned her. Where were you when your daughter's lover showed up at the hospital claiming to be the father? Did you congratulate him, or did you harass him like you're harassing me? She changed the subject, saying it was all a misunderstanding. I simply stopped responding to her. My wife, exhausted, with deep circles under her eyes, would beg me to hold the child, to help her in the middle of the night, to change just one diaper. I'd say it to her face, without mincing words. I will only get near that child when the DNA results come back. She would weep. She'd say I was being cruel, that I was missing the first moments of my son's life. But inside me, there was only coldness. How could I grow attached to someone who might not be mine? How could I live this lie? The climate at home was unbearable. I made my own food, washed my own plate, worked on my laptop in silence. She would drag her feet around the house, asking for help from time to time, and I would refuse. She tried to make small talk, to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but I just looked at her as if she were a stranger. At night, we slept in separate rooms and ate at different times. It was a forced cohabitation, nothing of a couple. Every now and then, her phone would vibrate on the table. A name saved as a nickname, notifications hidden. I deliberately looked away. I no longer wanted to be the guy who pretends not to see. I wanted the lab report. The rest would come after. The days that followed were torture. And when she realized that I would not accept that baby the way she had hoped, she finally agreed to the DNA test. I scheduled it without a second thought, in a hurry, and I was present for every step. When the envelope finally arrived, I was trembling from head to toe. I sat alone at the kitchen table, opened it slowly, and read every line. The result was there, in black and white. I was not the child's father. In that instant, it felt as if someone had torn a piece of me away. Everything I had planned, the dreams, the future, it had all been destroyed by that one truth, by her betrayal. I went upstairs with the paper in my hands. She was sitting on the bed, the baby in her lap, her eyes exhausted. I handed her the report. She read it, let the paper fall, and began to stammer. "This doesn't change anything. You're my husband. You love me." She tried to get closer, pleading. "It was a mistake. I was confused. I needed attention. But you were always the one by my side. Please, don't abandon us." I stood perfectly still. Without raising my voice, I just said, "You destroyed everything. I will not raise another man's son." She insisted, grabbing my arm, crying. "Think about him. It's not his fault. We can start over. I swear, I'll never—" I pulled my arm away and repeated, "There's no going back. It's over. It was all over the moment you gave yourself to another man." It was only then that she resorted to her last weapon. "Fine. Then he'll step up. The real father will be with me. We'll raise him together." She said it with rage, almost spitting the words, as if she wanted to wound me. I didn't answer. I remained impassive. The next day, I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce. The house was rented. The lease was in my name. I gave formal notice to the real estate agency and terminated the contract. She had 30 days to vacate. We did a simple inventory. Each of us took what was ours. The rest, I donated. I immediately canceled the utility accounts in my name, water, electricity, internet, and updated my address. There would be no alimony. The child was not mine, and that was the second blow to her. Desperate, she ran to her lover. She tried to move in with him, believing that with the DNA proof, he would assume his responsibility. But it didn't take long for her to realize he wanted nothing to do with it. She told me later, on the day of the divorce hearing. We were in the courthouse hallway, waiting for the judge to call us in. She asked to talk, wearing a look of utter defeat. It was there, with people bustling past, that she poured it all out. A pathetic attempt to make me feel pity. She said the lover couldn't handle it for even a week. The baby cried at night. She was a wreck from childbirth. The routine was overwhelming. He complained. He said it wasn't the right time, that he wasn't ready. He made up work excuses, invented trips. In the end, he simply vanished. He blocked her number, disappeared as if he had never existed. I listened to it all without moving a muscle. Inside me, there was anger, but there was also a strange sense of justice. He had only wanted the forbidden adventure, not the reality. She thought she was getting a new life. Instead, she was left alone, carrying the weight of her choices. The divorce was finalized quickly. I walked my own path. No alimony, no division of assets, no strings attached. She went back to her parents' house with a baby in her arms and a life in ruins. Her parents took her in, of course, but not with the same warmth as before. Their disappointment was a palpable thing. Every sleepless night, every diaper she changed alone. It was the price she paid for her choices. As for her lover, He simply went back to his life as a bachelor, as if nothing had ever happened, free and unencumbered, pretending he'd never made a single promise. And she was the one left to foot the bill, a child to raise on her own, a marriage in ashes, a reputation in tatters. As for me, I rented a small one-bedroom apartment close to my job. It was nothing fancy, but it was enough for a new beginning. I poured everything I had into my work, and finally, my dedication was recognized. Before long, I was offered a promotion to a different department, an offer I accepted without a moment's hesitation. It was a better position, one that offered stability and, mercifully, less grueling travel. After so many years on the road, I could finally stand still. I could build a routine. I could finally take care of myself. At first, coming home to the silence felt strange, but that strangeness soon melted into relief. No more arguments, no more suspicion. It was just my life, on my own terms. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have demanded a DNA test before even holding the baby? Do you think I was cruel? Or simply just? Leave your opinion in the comments below. We're eager to know what you think. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post new stories every week, exploring the kinds of cases that make us all reflect on the complexities of relationships.